In the grand scheme of the advancements of the field of photography, this ultimate photography ISO experiment, it's likely less ultimate and impactful than I believe it is. It's probably more on par with something like a focal length experiment on different sensor sizes. But, you know, I'm a sucker for meaningless experimentation. So this experiment has been in the works for many months now, truly since February. And certain questions were raised during the experimentation process that I didn't have the equipment to answer quite yet. And now, with a different season, it's middle of July, I think it's time to pick it up again and conclude this experiment. Very excited for this. So let's go ahead and roll the footage from February.
Well, you knew I had to get my caffeine and sugar for a road trip. It's never complete without it. Are all ISOs created equal? That's really the question of today's video. Is the ISO rating on a piece of analog film the same as the ISO that we use on our digital camera? We use these numbers so commonly and so freely, and yet my question is, what do they actually mean? Are they the same? Can I use my digital camera set to the same ISO as my film to meter my scene instead of bringing a spot meter? So to answer this question, what I've done is I've packed a whole bunch of camera gear, a whole bunch of film, and we're going to go out there, take a bunch of pictures using the same basic exposure settings on the same ISO, just to see how bright each photo is and whether or not these numbers are actually transferable across different film types and different camera brands. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Jude. I'm a film and digital photographer based out of Boise, Idaho. I go out with my cameras to discuss photography skills, discuss mindset, philosophy, the gear that we use. I do photography because I love it. I love the process. And I love the challenge of creating something using a camera. It's something I really am passionate about. So if this is your first time here, welcome. It's so good to have you. I really appreciate you joining me on today's video.
Right, so let's get into it. To sum up the ultimate photography ISO experiment, if you can realistically call it that, I packed 3 primary cameras to work with. A digital camera, a large format film camera, and a Polaroid I-2. Using these 3 cameras, I would be able to take the same photo at the same f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO to see just how different the exposure of each image is. My overall conclusion after this experiment? Well, ISO between all 3 capturing methods is relatively close and will give you a usable parallel. There are obviously a few minor factors to consider, but yeah, I was pretty surprised. I was pleasantly surprised at the exposure similarities. And instead of waiting till the end, I just wanted to reveal my observations early on, so anyone without the patience to watch a long photography video can just, you can click off and you still found something valuable here. That being said, I did put a ton of work into this one, so if you're interested in seeing how I came to this conclusion, please stick around. I'd greatly appreciate it.
I do have to pull over, add some gas to my vehicle, so I'll have to go ahead and do that. $2.99. Yeesh. We won't put much in there. Just a little bit. I remembered to fill up before I left. And then by the time I got into the van to leave, I had forgotten to fill up. It's just been the way.
Take me out, I wanna see big, big lights, they shine on me. I wanna lay my head and feel.
All right, we're back at it.
That's my way. That's my way.
I'm looking for scenes of high contrast. This is why I wanted a bright sunny day. I want scenes that are going to include some bright subjects and dark subjects. And actually this pull-off right here, right up ahead, might be ideal because I'll have the river. I'll have lots of different use, lots of different views. So I'm going to just pull over, see how we're going to do. Or I'd want to shoot upstream. There's even some potential to shoot up the hill up there. That might look nice too. It isn't bad. I'm gonna hop out and check it out. There's a red-tailed hawk. All right, let's see. Let's see what this is like. Okay, let's see. We shall see. Looks like we can go down here. Oh yeah, rocky embankment. Nice reflection. The sandy shore. See, I'm thinking something like this view. So one of the tricks is using an app. I have a viewfinder app. It's literally called Viewfinder. And it allows me to check my 6x12 with my 180 lens, and it gives me a good rough estimate of what it will look like. Normally this big boulder might be helpful as foreground element, but it's actually just too heavy in the scene. It's pulling the eye too far, so this rocky embankment right here works out much nicer, and I'm able to just kind of set up right there. My van's right up this hill, so yeah, I think this is it. I think this will work for photo number 1.
In the interest of time, I'm going to blast through some of the process here of capturing this first photograph. Using my large format Chamonix 4x5 and a 6x12 adapter, I'm able to load Kodak Portra 160, which theoretically matches the Polaroid's SX70 film, which is also ISO 160, theoretically.
Yeah, this'll have to do. It's kind of not as good anymore. It took me so long to get set up. The tree that I was hoping would be in my focus is now in shadow, so not as good. But the river's still nice. I might actually get more of this grove of trees on the left-hand side here instead of focusing so much on the tree back there. All right, we're in focus from front to back. At least that's what it looks like. At least the trees are in focus and this boulder's in focus, is which was what I'm interested in. I don't care if the background is a little bit soft. Mostly what I want is for this lit boulder and that last lit tree to be in focus. So a little bit of front standard tilt and a little bit of back standard tilt to lay down my plane of focus. Employ some Scheinflug principle. Okay, meter, take a shot. Okay, so I'm going to be shooting at f11 at 1/125th, ISO 160. I've got my adapter. Make sure it's locked in. Top and bottom, f11. 1/125th. Shutter's cocked. Dark slide comes out. 3, 2, 1. Okay, first exposure. So now I'm going to spin that until I see the number 3. Should be good to go for next shot. Okay, and now quickly, before this camera runs out of battery, I'm gonna do the same settings on my Sony. Set it to about 50 millimeters. We're going ISO 160, f11. That's kind of what the metering told me. It's a little dark, but I kind of like that. Gonna have some good detail in the highlights. Not a lot in the shadows. I might have underexposed by about a half stop, but I think I want that. I think I want my shadows to be almost completely black.
Let's hang here for a second on this white background. What I'm about to share is the scan I received back from Indie Film Lab. Now normally, I really love the scans I get back from them, but every so often one of their techs messes with the exposure of the image because they assume you want it to look a certain way, even when you select no corrections when you send your film. Check it out. This is not the exposure my metering told me I'd be getting. And when I first saw this, I was freaking out a little bit because I was thinking maybe I'd done something wrong or maybe the camera was broken. But then I got the negatives back from Indie Film Lab and scanned them myself. This is what I got from my Epson 850 and Silverfast like Nick Carver taught me. This scan is what I expected based on my metering, and when you compare it to the digital photo from my Sony, you can see just how similar they are. Nearly identical exposures.
There's another shot I want to get right up here. It's right up here by the van. There's a little wooden memorial cross right behind me here. I don't know if you can see that. Right behind me here. I'll take a shot of that on my Polaroid, black and white. I have one more frame of ISO 640 in that. Set my Sony to 640, take the shot, and then try to match it, manual settings, on the Polaroid. So after quite a bit of back and forth between the mirrorless and the Polaroid, what I've discovered is 1/250th is the fastest that can shoot. So I'm gonna have to go f22 at 1/250th to get this where I want it to be, which looks to be about 2/3 to a stop underexposed, but you'll see why in just a sec. Now we wait. See, what I've seen overall with this specific pack is that they're terrible. All the photos that I've taken out of this specific pack of black and white I-type film have been terrible. Lots of fragments, out of focus, overexposed, just things didn't seem to go well. I don't know if that was a problem during shipping or if it was damaged, but I am not very happy. Spent nearly $18 on this pack of film shipped from B&H, and yeah, it's not good. Okay, we'll let that sit, see what happens. Let's keep going. Well, if you're enjoying the video so far, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. If you want to join me for more adventures just like this one, hit that subscribe button, click the bell for notifications. It really helps me out. I'm trying to grow my channel so I can reach a wider audience, and I would really greatly appreciate any support that you're willing to throw my way.
Idaho State Highway 55 is also known as the Payette River Scenic Byway. It's one of those primary routes north to some of the best outdoor recreation in southern Idaho. Today, instead of seeing this highway as only a road to take me from point A to point B, I forced myself to observe the surrounding landscapes for photographic opportunities. It couldn't be called the Scenic Byway if there weren't scenes, right? With the sun working against me though, I had to turn back and return to a simple subject I spotted on my way up.
So I spotted this tree with a boulder right next to it. It's a singular tree with a singular boulder as I was driving up here, and I knew if I had an opportunity and I couldn't find another composition up the road, that was gonna be my shot. I love it, love the placement, simplicity. It's exactly what I wanted. So I'm gonna try to frame up, take that shot. we're gonna look. Really gotta be careful, there's an edge right there. I just hope there's enough contrast between the tree and the background that you'll actually be able to see it. This would look much better if the tree was like, I don't know, covered in green leaves. So what I've decided to do is add back tilt and front tilt. And what that's doing is it's forcing a shallow depth of field. So the foreground is very much out of focus. Background's crazy out of focus too. And I'm gonna shoot at f8. And we're gonna meter and see. So it should be pretty similar to the last one. That's it. You probably can't even hear me too well. It's so noisy, so at ISO 160, f8 1/60th. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Ah, stuck. Almost died. So one of the main reasons I picked Portra 160 is because of this. I bought a pack of SX70 film. It's supposedly rated to 160, so we're gonna do the same thing, f8 1/60th on my Polaroid I-2 and just see if we can get a similar result. This is my first time trying to put anything other than I-type film into my Polaroid. So I'm not sure if I'll be doing this very often. Now 1/60th is a pretty slow shutter, so I'm gonna mount it to a tripod. The shadow right now is giving me the separation that I wanted. Now with the Polaroid, I'm gonna use the app, try to get this going as fast as possible. Yep, okay.
Polaroid film is far more sensitive to temperatures than Polaroid will admit. Despite all my care to keep the developing film away from sunlight, it being exposed to the cold February evening resulted in a major blue/teal color shift, as you can see. I did my best to do a little adjusting, but with a scan, there's not much you can do. Even so, if you ignore that color, the exposure was pretty close to that digital photo I shared earlier. Now let's take a look at the 120 film. As you can see, the forced depth of field resulted in a very cool miniature look that I feel works really well with this small, simple subject in frame. Compare it to the Sony photo, and there is way less life to it. Well, at least the exposures are pretty much the same, which is, the whole point of this video.
Okay, the sun is about to set. Oh, my nose is running. Kind of just getting over a cold. The whole family has basically had a cold this whole, couple weeks. Has this been helpful so far? If so, hit that like button. Put a lot of work into this one, actually. I'm really hoping this video has been valuable and it hasn't answered a question that everybody already knew the answer to, except for me. It seems like something that maybe I should know already, this whole ISO thing. But I don't know, it's just my as I've been shooting different types of film and different types of formats, every time I take a shot, it's like the exposure's different. Especially as I've been experimenting more with Polaroid and the Sony system. Coming from the APS-C, it's just like everything feels different, and the exposures just seem to be coming out different than I expect almost all the time. Now I can work around it, especially when it's a digital photo, but with a film photo you don't have as much latitude to make changes. You also have to consider different film types have different I don't know, like shutter speed capabilities, if that makes sense. Depending on the sensitivity of the film, the quality of the film, at certain shutter speeds it will be more exposed than other shutter speeds just by nature of the film itself. So Polaroid film, for instance, has a shorter amount of time before it's overexposed because of the development that happens in that film versus, 120 film. You can kind of expose that for longer before it hits that reciprocity failure. I think I'm just gonna shoot this hillside up here. Pull over, shoot that hillside. Because then at least I'll have a bright subject. Okay, the sun is almost gone completely, and I don't know how the 160 film is going to do in this situation. It's going to be a long exposure, but I really want to take a picture of these cliffs across the road. So I think if I set up right there, take a shot there, it'll be more interesting than the hillside, because it'll give us an idea of what it would look like shooting long, dark exposures at the different ISO, or at the same ISO with different film types. So more tests, more experiments.
And then a content creator's worst nightmare. I had my microphone receiver plugged into my camera, but the battery ran out and it switched off. So this whole location has no audio. I'll do my best to narrate what is happening here, since this final photo of the day is my favorite of the trip, so I really want to share it and give it context. You see this rock face on the other side of the road with that green moss and cracked granite? It's beautiful. It captivated me immediately, and I wanted to photograph it. My goal was to get a big section of it filling my entire frame so that you could see all this detail and not get the context of sky or ground. That way it's arbitrarily anywhere. And the last bit of sunlight was even shining on it, adding that ideal amount of contrast between highlights and shadows. So here I am, setting up my Chamonix F-2 to capture it. With so little light to gather, my meter gave me a reading of 1/15 of a second shutter using an f8 aperture. That decided, I exposed my final frame, matching those same settings on my Sony A7RV and the Polaroid I-2. Once again, and for the last time, let's take a look and compare these images. The 6x12 pano turned out beautifully. I love the rich detail, I love the color, and that exposure was spot on. Mirroring that with my Sony's photo, and it's honestly a little difficult to tell them apart except for aspect ratio, of course. Just take a look at these two photos side by side. They're very close, right? I mean, especially in exposure. Now on the Polaroid here, I've already attempted to correct the color shift. It was terrible. It was almost entirely green. The exposure is pretty close to the digital image here. It was a little bit later in the day, so I probably should have slowed my shutter speed down a little bit, but they do match pretty closely. You can see I took them side by side, different focal lengths, so that they matched a little bit better. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure if the Polaroid is off because Polaroid film is a little less standard when it comes to light sensitivity, or if it's because of the cold. Maybe the cold threw off a little bit of the development process. So my conclusion, with all four images examined, ISO appears to be a standard brightness range that crosses brand lines and medium. Digital technology does a phenomenal job of mirroring the ISO of film so that they can be used in conjunction. It's actually very comforting knowing ISO is not just an arbitrary number, but that sometime, somewhere, a group of camera developers sat down and decided to make it a standard brightness scale so that all photographers and cameras over the centuries would use the same language and feel a deeper connection. Or maybe I should have just looked up the acronym ISO to realize it was set by the International Standards Organization to make sure ISO would be standard across all film types and camera brands throughout all generations. But, where's the fun in that?